What's happening, folks? Welcome back to Deckard Unicorn. My name's Martin.
My name's Shonagh.
And we've just celebrated 10 years together as a couple. Which is quite amazing, actually.
What do you mean? Best 10 years of your life,
yeah,
right?
You've put up with that long. But anyway, so yeah, we'll get to that stage in our relationship where I think you would do anything for me, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
So you'd rob a bank for me?
No.
Oh, come on. So you're in the doghouse for that?
Yes.
Sorry, why wouldn't you rob a bank for me?
I'd definitely make a dog's dinner of it.
Oh, God. You would surely get collared, I think.
Oh.
And take the long walk of shame to the police station.
Oh, no.
I'm so sorry. But our film this week it doesn't involve dogs, but it does involve bank robbery and has a name that's kind of linked to dogs. So yeah, it's Dog Day Afternoon, 1975, and it was directed by Sidney Lumet, and it stars Al Pacino, John Cazale, Charles Durning, James Broderick, Lance Henriksen, Chris Sarandon, and a bunch of other people as well.
You know something, people? You're going to be remembered the rest of your lives for the day you got held up and kidnapped.
So the film was written by a man called Frank Pearson, who's a really famous Hollywood screenwriter, and he did Naked City, Cool Hand Luke, The Anderson Tapes, Star is Born as well. I think he directed that as well. So yeah, really famous screenwriter.
And these days, he's probably quite well known as well for writing on Mad Men and The Good Wife, so his career's been quite extensive.
Yeah, that's right. So turned in a draft of the script, and it was kind of like immediate that the studio absolutely loved it and just knew it was going to be a hit. I think the producer was Martin Bregman, and when he read through it, he just knew this was going to be bank, essentially. It was going to work.
Oh, bank.
Bank. So yeah, he was an amazing producer. He's produced some amazing films, Beverly Hills Cop, Midnight Run, just off the top of my head. But yeah, he's been responsible for producing a lot of sort of Hollywood classics, especially in the late 70s, early 80s. But yeah, the studio absolutely loved it and decided they wanted them to sort of find a director. So I think Bregman got in contact with Sidney Lumet, and yeah, it was an amazing coup for this film to get someone of Sidney Lumet's calibre to come along and direct it. So he'd done the 12 Angry Men and also the Anderson Tapes, Serpico Network as well, just after this film.
So Sidney Lumet immediately wanted Al Pacino to play the role of the protagonist, Sonny.
Yeah, Sonny.
However, Al Pacino wasn't really up for it in the first instance.
Yeah, he wasn't having it.
I think he was exhausted off of the back of Godfather Part 2 and having a lot of really intense work prior to this.
Well, he did an amazing run up to that. You know, he'd worked with Lumet before in Serpico, and obviously he had Godfather 1 and 2, Panic in Needle Park at the early start of the 70s. So yeah, I think he claimed in that documentary I watched that he was burnt out. Yeah. He was tired, and they met up in London. I think it was Sidney Lumet's apartment. Yeah, he kind of talked him round at that point, didn't he?
Yeah, I think Al Pacino has sort of admitted that he didn't really want to work that hard after what he just had to do, and he knew that Lumet would work them really, really hard. That was his method. But he was called up and asked if he would consider reading the script again and just really giving it another shot. And when he read it again, he was blown away by it and really decided it was a role that he wanted to play. Yeah,
that's right. It was Martin Bregman, again, the producer, who just said, have another go at it, please. You know, because essentially they had just decided that was it. Sidney Lumet, obviously, as I said, had worked with him, so they just knew he was going to be able to do it, and there was no one else with that kind of range who would be able to carry this off. Pacino was taking a risk, but also he just wasn't sure what he could bring to the role, and he didn't see what they saw in him as far as being able to play it. So he had a lot of apprehension. Again, it wasn't about the fact that it was a gay character. I think it was just, it's about how the film's going to sell and how it's going to play. The actors probably didn't want to be in films where they were going to be complete bombs, so there's probably a worry that it was going to bomb. And coming off the back of something like The Godfather, where his star was really high, you know, I think there was maybe a little bit of fear there that this might sort of hinder his career or hamper his career in some way.
But I think on rereading the script, he realised that actually the acting challenge behind it and the human story that it was telling was really complex and really he had a big story to tell. Yeah,
I think when he understood the nuances of the character, as you said, it was more than that. Yeah. You know, again, that's a kind of superficial thing that when people watch this film, it's something that you remember about it is the fact that the lead character was gay. And he was married to another man, and that man was in the process of getting a sex change. So, but it's never explicitly put forward as like a major plot point. It's just a very human drama, and I think it's possible when Pacino went through his first reading, that's maybe what was sticking out to him, just like, oh, gay character, and I'm not sure about this. Whereas when he read it again, it was like, oh, I understand what's going on here now. Like, this is just a very personal, very human drama, and I can definitely do this. I can bring something to it. I think the main point was not sensationalising that part of the subject and just being about the relationship issues.
Absolutely. So the film was made in 1975, so some of the terminology that's used and the use of pronouns is quite out of date. I think at the time, though, nothing seems to be disrespectful. Obviously, the story that's being told isn't our story. It's not one that we've got direct experience with, so other people might feel differently. But our impression is that particular subject matter was treated respectfully. But if it was made today, then some of the wording would probably be quite different. So I don't think people say sex change operation now. I think it would be like gender reassignment or gender confirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
And also throughout the film, Leon, who is Al Pacino's wife, in the film is referred to as him. But again, I think possibly now different pronouns would be used. So if you hear us using certain pronouns or certain terminology, it's probably come from the film and the era that the film was in, rather than from a place of disrespect. And
I think that's one of the things that's great about this film in particular, is that it was addressing those issues and taking them seriously and not making a freak show out of the characters, which would have been quite easy to do. And that is also on the actors as well, where they're not overplaying that angle. Pacino had seen that there was a point where both actors kiss in an embrace, but he recognised that wasn't or shouldn't be part of the plot, simply because this was the breakup of a relationship. And when does that happen at the breakup of a kind of messy relationship? It doesn't. They generally just want to go their separate ways, and there's no physical contact a lot of the time. It's a very difficult situation to go and see that person in the flesh.
Yeah, so I think Pacino felt that putting in a kiss there would be sensationalising the relationship.
Well, that's it. It would become the thing that the film was mostly remembered for, especially at that time, because people weren't as tolerant. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But again, it's kudos to the writer for putting these things forward, and also to the actors and director for treating the source that material seriously.
Because it is a true story, although
exactly.
It does deviate from some of the truth for the sake of drama. But there was a man who held up a bank in Brooklyn in the 1970s in order to pay for surgery for his wife.
Yes, John Watovich, is it?
Yeah, also we're definitely going to say that wrong. I'm so sorry.
So in the film, he's just known as Sonny Wartzik, but I think he's John Watovich in real life.
The reason they don't use his name in the film was because the actual robber didn't like certain aspects of the film, so he didn't allow them to use his name. But other characters are named as they were. So, for example, his accomplice, Sal, that was his name in real life. So in a letter to the New York Times, John said, "I feel deeply hurt by the movie, and I hope that you, the reader, will remember the above if you have seen the movie or are about to see it. I have taken the movie people to court for the exploitation and for their breach of contract, but the battle will be a long and hard one." There was a lot of aspects about it he didn't like. Some of them were based around the fact that there's a slight hint that the FBI agent and him were in cahoots towards the end. So apparently he took a lot of flack for that in prison.
So that he'd be, spoilers.
Sorry. Oh, sugar, I've just given away the whole ending. I don't think it was necessarily portrayed that way, but obviously people have different sensitivities. So he didn't like that aspect, but he was highly complimentary about the acting and the directing and things like that.
Well, we are going to talk about the end anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but we'll get to that later.
At approximately 3 p.m. on August 22nd, 1972, Sonny Wartzik and Sal Naturale entered the First Brooklyn Savings Bank and attempted a robbery.
So the film primarily takes place inside the bank. They built this bank inside an old disused factory unit. So because they were going to be in there for so long, they decided that the actors would live there pretty much. So for 3 weeks they rehearsed and just sort of stayed there. And Lumet wanted to try and get a sense of, almost like a sense of community and camaraderie, so that these actors would really begin to understand each other. And I think they rehearsed for 3 weeks, and they kind of meticulously blocked out where everyone was going to be, where they were going to sit and all that kind of stuff. And in the end up, the shooting script that they originally had was changed quite extensively because Lumet started to look more at improvisation. So he says in that interview that he wasn't a fan of improvisation, but he decided to maybe use it on this occasion. So he allowed the actors to sort of go more into themselves, like what would they do in those particular situations. So they started to interact with each other very differently. So while they were recording sort of tests, he decided to start to write down what they were saying. So that then became the script. So before they even started shooting, it underwent a lot of revision, even though the actual structure is the exact same. The plot structure is the same. Everything plays out as it should. It's just dialogue, the kind of the connective tissue, if you will. All that stuff is more improvised. Well, it was improvised at the time. I don't think there was much that was actually improvised on camera when it went to the shoot, but definitely when they were rehearsing, there was so many changes. But I think it gives the film this kind of vibrance and authenticity that you can tell that these actors are really invested in what they're doing. And that's one of the things that you take away from this film immediately, is how real it feels.
Oh, completely real.
It feels very natural, and it's almost like you're watching a documentary. And obviously Sidney Lumet is like really well known for this, that kind of realism in his style, really energetic. He gets down and gritty, he deals with like tricky subject matters and handles them all really well. And obviously rings his actors out as well, like he sort of pushes them right to the edge. But you never get a bad performance in a Sidney Lumet film because he really pushes everyone to get 110% out of them.
I think Lance Henriksen said that before shooting they went to like a big ballroom and they'd actually marked out like where the bank would be, where the police would be, and during the rehearsal everyone was there. So even if you weren't actively involved in the scene, you were on site and part of it, which made it feel like a very organic interlocking thing rather than a scene outside on the road, a scene in the bank. Like there was follow through, there was connection. It's
a very odd combination of being super organised, which it clearly was, but also improvised.
I guess so. It's got that like really frantic kind of feeling to it. But I guess in order to create that properly without being out of control, you actually have to have a lot of planning and a lot of methodical method.
Yeah, and I suppose you also have to have like boundaries, because obviously you don't want to like do something too crazy where you end up out of shot.
Yeah.
So there's an element of giving the actor space to play, like a sandbox. They've got free rein within that, but they can't go outside it. So again, it's that balance that an actor has to strike between understanding the rules and the spots they have to hit, but not going too wild. But also having a kind of improvisational feel to it, where it feels live and organic and real. And this film really, really needs it. Because it's depicting real events as well, then you have to do that. You can't over-dramatise it.
So originally the film was going to be called
Boys in the Bank,
which sounds terrible. So it was actually the name of the article that inspired that they I don't know if it was in the New York Times, but that was the article about the actual bank robbery that inspired the screenplay. But thankfully they decided that wouldn't translate well to film.
It sounds terrible. It sounds like a Will Ferrell comedy.
Yes, it does.
Like, it would definitely have lessened the impact.
I think Dog Day Afternoon as well really plays into this feeling of this really hot, stuffy, boring,
drawn out
day on a in the summer.
Yeah, that's what it feels like in summer. Everything's heavy, you feel tired immediately almost. Just sitting, walking around even, it's tiring, especially in somewhere like New York where it can get really hot in the summer. And it feels really close. The walls of the city just seem to sort of come in on you and stuff like that. There's so many people and the traffic and the noise and all that kind of stuff, and it could be...
it's like oppressive, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Very, very oppressive to your senses. With all of that in mind, plus the fact that you're thinking about a robbery, and, yes, that name does sort of play into the feeling that the actor or the characters would have had on their way to this job, for example. It would have felt like that, like this is such a heavy, tense, pressurised situation.
Nobody move! Get over there!
The attempt failed.
There's no money here.
They picked it up this afternoon. There's only 1,100.
This is too much.
What are your first impressions of this film then? When was the first time you seen it?
Okay, so full disclosure, for many, many years, Martin has been trying to get me to watch Dog Day Afternoon.
I just outed you.
And the whole time I've been like, oh, what's it about? And it's been like, well, it's an Al Pacino film and it's about a bank robbery. And I've always been like, no, don't fancy that. No. And then recently, when we were talking about Fright Night with Chris Sarandon.
Yeah, that's right.
Sarandon. I never know how to say his name, so I'll say it wrong. You mentioned that he is Al Pacino's partner in Dog Day Afternoon.
Yep.
And I was kind of like, what? So immediately it sort of challenged my perception of what the film was about. And that piqued my interest. So after that, I was really interested in watching it. And within the first few minutes, so, you know, they go into the bank, things are sort of starting to kick off. And then Al Pacino pulls his gun out of the flower box that does anyone ever carry a big long box with real flowers in it? Is that just a gun box, really?
The Terminator did that as well, remember?
Oh, that's true.
Terminator 2.
He did it,
a flower box with a shotgun in it.
Although he was much more
copying Al Pacino.
He was much more competent.
Yeah.
So from that moment where he pulls out the weapon and actually he's got it caught in the ribbon of the box, it's hysterical. It's so funny. There's so many comical moments in it that are really deeply, deeply funny, but it's also so tragic, and it's moving, it's deep,
It's human, it's real.
it is, it's a
honest.
love story.
Yeah.
It's but not in a tragic way, not in a, you know, happily ever after kind of way.
Yeah.
It's about two people who are deeply in love but just can't find a way to be together without.
Yeah, that goes multiple ways.
Yeah.
You know, because Sonny's character in this has two relationships. You know, he was married to Angie, but obviously he's left her and he's went and married Leon. And both of those relationships are on the rocks for different reasons. Yeah, it's definitely a very human story. And as you said, it's a tragic comedy. I mean, I find it so hilarious at points and then just so moving at other points. And there's very few films have got that great blend.
Yeah.
You know, they usually go far too far on one of those scales, you know, like too funny or too dramatic, and the blend is lost. But this is an absolutely perfect blend, and it's moment to moment.
Yeah.
Where you can actually say something that's funny and then you think about it for a second, it's actually, you know,
Like
tragic.
it breaks your heart.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that is a brilliant script.
I was so impressed. I was so impressed with the performances, and I was really impressed that although this film was made in the mid-70s, that actually the attitudes in it were very progressive.
Yeah, exactly. Again, we said that right at the beginning, but that's one of the things that the film should definitely be applauded for. That's why I think this film deserves a lot more exposure in the modern world, because it was ahead of its time in that respect as far as representation was concerned. And again, takes that subject matter very, very seriously. And there's no cheap shot, because these are just people.
Yeah.
They're just human people. This is not freaks. This is just people trying to get along, and they can't. And it's just a really sad story, ultimately.
For the people of the neighborhood, it was a sideshow.
Sonny! Sonny!
But for Sonny and Sal, the hostages, and the cops, it was a dog day afternoon.
So the lead character is Sonny Wurtzek, and he's played by Al Pacino. And this is one of Pacino's best performances, without a shadow of a doubt.
I think this is one of cinema's best performances.
Yeah, there's moments in this where, I mean, didn't get the Oscar. He didn't get the Oscar, unfortunately, because he was up against One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is
such a shame.
which is a film we need to do as well, because it is absolutely astounding.
And I also haven't seen
You
it.
haven't seen it. But it's astounding. So it was just the year of that film.
Yeah.
That film just hit harder, and he had an amazing performance in that with Jack Nicholson and so on. But yeah, any other year in cinema history, any other year, he wins hands down without a problem. And there's some who would argue there's moments in this film that are better than anything Jack Nicholson did in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think Nicholson's performance overall is amazing, and it's just, you know, it's up and down and there's such range to it. But Pacino just, there's points in this film where, especially like the conversation on the phone, that monologue is just astounding acting.
Yeah.
It really is. It's unbelievably good.
Like, I feel, just thinking about those moments, I still feel like a little bit emotional.
Yeah.
Really, really moving. Really.
There's two sequences in particular. The monologue where he speaks to Leon, where essentially he goes through, to me anyway, it seems like he goes through all 5 stages of grief in the space of a phone call,
Yeah.
like a 3-minute phone call. And at the end of it, it's the kind of acceptance
Yeah.
of the situation, and you can see he is just done. Like, he is absolutely finished, and he's so frustrated, he's so tired, he just doesn't know what to do anymore. And I think in the background, Sidney Lumet had actually got him to do both of those scenes back to back.
Yeah.
So, and he was exhausted.
Like, they didn't even cut in between. So he had a phone call to Leon, and he had a phone call to his children's mother. I can't remember what her, Angie. And he did them back to back so that he was like exhausted and really in the moment. And then he knew that he would get even better out of him if he just made him keep going. So without cutting, without stopping the cameras, he just sort of leaned in and was like, right, we're going again. And he said, like Al Pacino looked over at him with absolute daggers. Like, I'm going to kill you. But he did it, and he brought out the exhaustion and the sheer frustration, and it's incredible. It's such a moving performance.
It's an old school style of getting the best out of your actor. It's definitely frowned upon nowadays.
It's torturous.
It's psychologically torturous. Definitely. So it depends on the person, I suppose, as far as those days are concerned. I don't think Al Pacino has any adverse effects from that time, and he loves Sidney Lumet. He still to this day sings his praises, and he understands that what he did got the best out of him. So in his eyes, he said it was right what he did. He looks at it and says, yeah, that was the right thing to do, otherwise I wouldn't have given that performance. But nowadays you couldn't imagine a director doing that and saying, you're not having a break, you're just going again.
Well, I don't know, there's rumours about some directors not being so.
Well, yes.
But yeah, it's
but in general it would be frowned upon. It would be big news.
And I mean, at the end of the day, these are people who are at their workplace. And,
exactly.
Everyone deserves to be safe.
And whether or not you agree with that, or whether you think people are too soft these days or whatever, ultimately there are still actors out there who can get those performances without that. Like that's why it's acting. You're trying to get there. But I think just back in the day, that was just seen as an accepted way of doing it. Kubrick was famous for it.
Yeah, I was going to say The Shining.
A million takes, and the first take could have been fabulous, but it would just get you to do it again and again and
until
again
you were
and again.
broken.
And as you said earlier, I think Sidney Lumet liked to work. That's Pacino's words were. He liked to work his actors and try to get that next level out of you. Because we play in a taiko group, and it's a very physical art form, and it's one of these ones where you can tire quite quickly, but you still have to sort of keep your energy levels up. I found that very similar to, there's a concept called uchikomi where you practice repetitively and you'll get tired, and the hope is that while you're doing this, your mind will suddenly get into this space, this zone where the pain sort of fades away and the tiredness fades away, and all of a sudden you're in this zone, you're playing, you're doing it, your body's just working, it's just doing what it should do, and it's trusting that process to get there. And it's funny that this acting process seems to be the same. Pacino said he was pushed past exhaustion and tiredness and thought, and the words just came out. It was just there. It was just raw emotion. He was in the zone, and it was only when the cry cut, he's like, oh, we're done. He'd lost all sense of place. He was just Sonny on the phone to that person, saying what he needed to say and reacting the way he thinks that actor would react, but it was all unconscious. So I think that happens in a lot of art forms, where especially music and dance and acting and stuff like that, where there's a sweet spot, a zone where you're there in the groove, in the zone, whatever you want to call it, where everything fades away about technique and who's watching. It's just you in the moment doing your thing. Yeah,
but you've got to put in a lot of work to break down the barriers and to break down what you're holding back.
That's it.
But that in itself is exhausting.
Yeah, it's not an easy mental state to get yourself into, and I think a lot of experience and a lot, as you say, a lot of work goes into that, and then at some point it will happen for you.
Well, you keep away from this bank or we're going to start throwing bodies out the front door one at a time. I'm a Catholic and I don't want to hurt anybody, you understand?
One of the aspects that Pacino brings to the character is this feeling that he's actually trying to do his best by everyone.
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to keep everyone happy. He's trying to, there's a scene where he's trying to get people who are starting to say they need the toilet. So instead of being like, oh, well, screw you, pee in a bucket.
A bank robber.
He's like, right, okay, well, let's organise toilet trips. And then he's, trying to keep people fed and trying to keep people happy. And, he's, whether or not his reasons are selfish, which is a bit deeper, he is essentially robbing the bank for money to pay for someone who he loves to get help. So he's trying to help lots and lots of people, but he's just doing a really bad job of it.
Yeah, I think Sidney Lumet said that he feels like this magician who can just give everyone what they want, like just make it magically appear, but ultimately he fails
and just
at everything
lets
he
everyone
tries to
down.
do. He just lets everyone down. It's almost like he just promises too much, like it's more than he can handle, and he takes it all on like it's fine. You see that there's a moment in the bank where he's starting to run down, what he's doing, like, I'm robbing this bank, I'm trying to have all these ideas, I'm trying to give everybody do this bit. And he's like, I'm handling it, I'm doing it, but you can see that the process is already breaking down.
Yeah, he's feeling the strain.
and none of these things are working, but he's still got this mindset where he's got a handle on it. And I think, like you said earlier, for me, his character is selfish. Like, everything is motivated by what he wants. He's not listening to the people around him, and people are not listening to him. So he definitely has that aspect to his character where he just tries so hard to give everyone what they want, and it's impossible, but he thinks it's doable.
Yeah.
He's got this almost like
he says it at one point. He says it over and over again. I had a plan. I had a plan.
He's got like almost an indomitable spirit. Another thing that Sidney Lumet spoke about was the fact that everybody sees Sonny differently. Like, if you were to ask everyone involved in the film, like all the characters that interact with him, which they did, everybody's seen him completely differently. He was such an odd fish, an odd character.
Like, almost like he had multiple personality. I'm not saying that he had a personality disorder, but he seemed to have very different personalities for different faces.
He was never himself, I don't think.
I think that's right.
And he just tried to treat people the way he believed they wanted to be treated. But one of the things that stands out to me in Pacino's performance is the facial actions, like the facial tics that he's got. See, if you watch him really closely, it's so nuanced.
Yep.
Like, when he shouts, he's got like these wee kind of winks and sort of flicks of his head and all that kind of stuff, and the way he moves his hands and all these gestures and stuff like that. He's so animated. Again, it's like a kind of manifestation of his inner turmoil, I think. Where you can tell from his physicality what's going on. He's nervous, he's on edge, he's frustrated, but there's points where he looks absolutely distraught and exhausted as well. So it's a bravura performance, as they say. Like, it's one of those ones where you can't believe what you're watching at the time. It's just, if you're just watching him from a perspective of technical acting, and believability and all those things, there's not a single missed beat. There's not a line that's not delivered at 110%. It's an amazing performance overall. I also love the comedic touches as well, and I think Al Pacino was actually like quite a good physical actor. Like, there's physical comedy in this, and there's a danger that it might be seen as too funny.
Yeah, like, there was not a hint of, it's incredibly funny. Like, it's not just a little bit funny, it's really, really funny. And it could have very easily have been slapstick, and it absolutely wasn't at all. So that takes a great deal of timing and a real appreciation of how to balance that. And he did such a good job. Like, the moment when he falls into the plant behind him, and
it's just the way he turns round to that, and it's such a natural reaction. Like, where did that come from? He wasn't expecting it. But this is kind of one of the central things of the movie, is so many things happen to him that he didn't expect. Because he's kind of blinkered, and so many things just come out of left field at him. Those wee things just showcase that. That's, again, visual storytelling 101. Your character is shown that he's out of his depth. He's out of his league. The plant pot, he bumps into it, doesn't know where it came from, didn't see it, right? Getting the gun out of the box, can't get it out. It's got the boa wrapped around it, and it's got stuck. But he acts that so well. That was actually a mistake. That they didn't mean that to happen, but he plays it so well, like that aggressive, trying to get the bow off.
It's so funny. I was in stitches.
And then he's going to try and cover the security camera with the spray. And he's like 2 foot too short, and he's trying to jump up. Man. It's just so funny.
And it's like almost cringy, but it's not cringy because you're kind of just watching it in disbelief, like, oh my god. And as you say, it's that idea that in his head he's gone into this having planned the operation and knows exactly what's going to happen. And actually he's not got a clue. No. And I think another point that highlights that later on is when his partner Sal is saying, you said that we would get away with this or we would take our lives. But Al Pacino clearly had no intention of ever doing that. He thought he was getting away with this. He did not think that there was any way that they would be getting caught.
All right, who has to go to the bathroom?
Sonny's partner in crime is John Cazale, so he plays Sal Naturile. I thought it was I actually thought that was a fake name, but
it was actually his name, like the name of the actual accomplice in real life. So you'd be familiar with
Fredo. Have a wee Fredo.
I know it was you, Fredo.
So John Cazale was famous for both Godfather movies, and he was the famous Fredo who betrays his brother Michael. Shh, spoiler.
Sorry.
He was also latterly in like The Deer Hunter. He sadly passed away not long after that, but such an amazing actor. He is so gifted, and he's so odd. So
absolutely the last person they wanted to cast in this role. The real Sal was about 18 years old. Very
younger,
young boy.
Good looking apparently.
So they had this idea of this kind of like Botticelli angel type little boy playing, a very good looking, charming young man playing this part.
Yeah.
And Al Pacino was like, do you know who you need?
I know
Need
a
my
guy.
pal. And they were like, no, not a chance.
Aye.
But then he asked them to consider letting him read. And one of the things they were saying was that everyone who read for the parts read alongside Al Pacino to gauge the chemistry. And as soon as he started, they were like, this is it, it's amazing.
Yeah, I think Sidney Lumet said that he made him cry.
He made me cry.
But he's such a great actor. I mean, died very young. He was just reaching his potential. I mean, look at the films he's in. Godfather 1 and 2 and The Deer Hunter, right, as 3, just for example. They're ridiculously high level films. And he played like really amazing parts in
So
all
I
of them.
think every single film that he was in was like nominated for
Multiple Oscars.
So I think he genuinely wasn't in a bad film. So,
No,
you know,
I don't think so.
he did leave us with a perfect score.
He did, he certainly did. But yeah, it's funny you said that. There was so many of those actors actually came from Pacino's sort of theatre circle. It was people that he'd worked on stage with in New York and various other places. So they had a very good rapport already.
Yeah.
He knew a lot of these people and he just knew they would work. And when you've got somebody like Sidney Lumet in charge of great actors, then you're never going to get anything less than an amazing
Especially like
performance.
they rehearsed it like a play.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
They didn't rehearse it like a film.
Yeah, and it does have that feel about it. You know, it should be, because it's all self-contained.
Yeah.
You know, like in a theatre performance, everything's in the same room, essentially. You know, I mean, you can build sets and everything to make it look like different places, but essentially you're all in the same place.
That is actually exactly what it's like, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like a theatre show. Because there's only very few bits that take place outside, and most of that is kind of like objective shots.
Yeah, you're looking towards the bank.
Yeah, subjective shots, kind of like from helicopters and from like an audience or crowd perspective kind of thing, where, you know, they're looking at the action. And when Sonny comes outside, you know, it's all that kind of thing. But the vast majority of the film takes place in a very enclosed space, all in that bank. And then, you know, like the finale takes place in an even tighter space. The great thing about his character is that he doesn't actually say that much.
Oh, he doesn't.
You know, like Pacino's very verbose in this film. He says a lot, and he's clearly the mouth of the two characters. But everything is done in his physicality and his demeanour and his delivery. So everything's got weight. Like every time he does deliver a line, it's got great weight to it. And even though the weight might be funny or again tragic, the particular moment I'm thinking about is when Al Pacino says, you know, we're going to get away with this. Where do you want to go? Which country do you want to go to? John Cazale thinks about it for a bit and then just says Wyoming. And it's so it's hilarious, because it's like, oh man, he doesn't get it. It's not, that's not even a real country, you know, that's a state.
It's not a real country.
You know what I mean? Well, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's not
country,
another country, yeah.
but it's a state. And then that makes you think, oh my God, this guy hasn't left New York, maybe.
Yeah, he's probably very poorly educated.
Yeah.
He's probably had not the right starts in life, and
Yeah.
you know, that's probably led him down a certain path.
It's tragic.
And
really
it is, and it's just when you see his face and his eyes, and
again, it's so earnest.
it's so
Like,
earnest.
he's not, he thinks about it deeply and then says that.
And I can't express enough how not comical the delivery is, you know. But that line was actually Cazalli's. That was improvised by him.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
the
right.
director apparently had to cover his mouth to stop himself from laughing because he was so taken aback by it.
But that's, again, the beauty of great actors. So Pacino also said in this film that as soon as they got into the character, they would start to question the script, question
What's
the
my
motivation. Well, but I mean, that's what you need.
Yeah.
That's what starts to breed amazing performances. And again, there's not a weak performance in this movie at all. So you can tell that it works. Obviously, you need to have a director who's willing to accept that and also work with it.
Yeah.
You know, so he clearly knew these actors knew what they were doing, and he allowed them that freedom. He clearly wouldn't put his name to something that he wasn't happy with.
Yeah.
So
I guess it's a level of trust and a level of comfort that comes from knowing that the people you're working with are highly skilled.
yeah,
and
they
having a
know
lot
their
of faith.
craft.
Yeah.
They know their craft. I mean, directors and actors are very different. It's not to say one can't be the other. You know, a director becomes an actor or vice versa. But the ones who are solely dedicated to each craft are very different, and they bring different things to the table. The other funny thing about the relationship between Sonny and Sal, it seems like they don't really know each other, and it's like they're getting to know each other better through the pressure of this situation.
There is a moment as well where Sal really took me aback, and that's the moment where Al Pacino's character says to the police that they're going to start throwing bodies out the door.
Yeah.
And he says that like for the kind of the shock factor.
Yeah.
He doesn't really mean it.
Yeah, you can see he doesn't mean it.
But Sal turns to him and he says, "Did you mean that? Because I'm ready. I'm ready for that."
Yeah.
And I was taken aback by that. I absolutely didn't expect that from that character. And you felt that Sonny was also taken aback by that.
Again, that's the power of an actor like that can deliver in that way. That's not much of a line, like I said earlier. It doesn't say much, but when he does, it has impact. And that one really, like you say, comes out of left field.
And I think that really feeds into the lack of communication between the two, that they had quite different expectations of how things would go, what was expected of each other, and you know, when the chips were down, that caught them out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It just seems like they're learning a lot about each other as this thing progresses. There's that funny moment where they try and catch each other's eye in the bank, and they're between the pillar, and they're just like going left, right, to try and find each other's faces, you know. And it's a really
Like,
tense situation, but it's funny.
It sounds really, the way we're saying it, if you've not seen it, it sounds like it's really slapstick, and it's not. It's really not.
It's just panicky. It's like nervous energy, and like
then you feel nervous for them, and it's just so well done.
It's like the bank robbery version of going in for the first kiss, and you're like, head goes one way, head goes the other way.
I ain't going back to that prison, Sonny.
Right from the beginning of the robbery, it pretty much goes tits up, because Sal and Sonny come in with an accomplice, and he gets cold feet like
but
immediately.
He gets cold feet like after the robbery started. He's like, no, you know, he's not like, do you know what, guys, I'm not going to do this. Like Sal's already got a machine gun out, and he's like,
yeah. They're just waiting on the next step, and he's like, I need to go. Like, I can't do this.
And it's just, the way it plays out is just too funny. And because he's like starting to leave, Al Pacino's like, but you can't take the car. Like, we need that. And he's like, but how am I supposed to get home? And he's like, take the bus. And it's just so insane.
Yeah, it really is. It goes bad pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And within minutes, the police are outside and they've phoned the bank. And they speak to Sonny and they let him know that he's basically surrounded. So hundreds of police basically descend on the bank.
Like a bus of police comes in.
And then you've got all the crowds and everything appear as well.
The TV cameras.
You name it.
And this was the first time I'd seen like the 70s like mobile, obviously not Steadicams, but like mobile cameras where the cameramen, they've got like the backpacks and stuff. That was pretty awesome.
Look like Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
It's for you.
What?
The police arrived.
This is Detective Sergeant Eugene Moretti. What are you doing in there?
But yeah, the cop in charge of the situation is Charles Durning, who is just amazing. He is, he looks under so much pressure as well. Like, between him and Sonny, they look very similar. It's like looking in a mirror. You know, his hair's kind of unkempt, and you know, like he's not dressed very well. He's got a kind of ill-fitting suit. He's overweight. He's sweating.
I mean, everyone's sweating in this film.
That's true. But he looks under so much pressure, and he's really doing his best to try and sort of sweet talk him and try and get the situation under control, get some hostages out. I love his performance in this. He just gets so frustrated so easily. You can tell he's desperate, and Pacino even says that in the script, where he's desperate to shoot him. He's desperate to shoot him. They're desperate to get this over and done with.
The cops are. They're all like feeling like, oh,
they're all
they're too hot. They're fed up.
But that just adds the tension. But they obviously know that there's someone else inside the bank who's holding everybody hostage, so they can't take the risk. And he's kind of hamstrung by that. Yep. So, and again, Pacino's character knows this is the case and takes full advantage of that. You know, he starts like pushing his advantage quite a lot. And you can see that the tables turn quite quickly and he has no power there.
Yeah.
You know, he becomes kind of like cut off at the knees, Charles Durning in this.
Especially when the crowds start to gather and then they actually start turning in favour of the bank robber. Well,
that's it. Yeah, and I think the second unit director actually said to Pacino that he should mention Attica. So the Attica riot had happened not long before this. You know, it's like a prison riot, and the police or the prison guards had acted with lethal force on the rioters and stuff like that. So a lot of people have been killed. So it was
and I don't think it was just rioters. I think it was like indiscriminate.
Yeah, it was kind of like shameful the way they dealt with it. So he had said that, why don't you just use that, say that, you know, and a way of courting the public opinion, you know, like you get everybody on your side. So, you know, Pacino used that in the character and the people went wild and started chanting.
And what was crazy was that because this was just a street in New York, they had all the extras who were playing people in the crowd, but on top of that, actual real crowd gathered behind those people.
That's right.
So when he started shouting Attica and engaging the crowd, he then started engaging the people who also became a part of the film who were
people that lived there as well. There was actually real houses and people just looking out their windows.
Yeah, so the people that you see hanging out their window watching are literally the people who live across the road hanging out their window watching. They'd said to them, look, you know, we don't want to inconvenience you, but you know, if you want to hang out your window and watch it all, you absolutely can, because that's what people would do.
Yeah, exactly. The change in dynamic. The cops have surrounded this place. There's only two people holding the bank up. And and there's this army of cops right there standing outside, so it's kind of like heavily weighted in their favour. And he's kind of confident at first, like, you know, he's calling them out over the phone and saying, you're surrounded, like there's loads of us out here, like you've just not got a leg to stand on. And over the course of their sort of first few interactions, that power dynamic shifts, and then when the Attica moment happens, like the crowd is on the side of Sonny, and the police have basically lost any foothold.
Yeah, and there's so many more in the crowd than there are the police.
And it becomes a really difficult situation for that. And Sidney Lumet said that after watching this film, like, it actually informed how police would deal with situations of that manner. You can't allow large crowds to gather, and you can't allow it to get out of control, because quite quickly it could come to a major situation. Because, as you just said, there's only so many cops. There's going to be more of the public, and if things start going bad, there's a lot of numbers, so that could go bad both ways. But yeah, Moretti is amazing, but he's replaced by Sheldon, who's an FBI agent, and I thought they were kind of like yin and yang, those two. You know, because Charles Durning's character's this kind of like hot and heavy and sweaty and, you know, losing control, and he's the polar opposite. He's so calm, surveys it. I think they called him the human searchlight. That was what Sidney Lumet nicknamed him, because he just quietly scans the area, scans the scene,
profiles everyone, and kind of works out what their motives are. He's got his sharp suit. You know, even like the way his trousers fall on his shoes, you can tell like the man's got it together.
And he's a fantastic actor as well. I think he's like quite a lot of TV shows and stuff like that. He's a great presence in this, and he just brings that level of calm, but you can tell that he's not to be messed with. You know, he's got everything in control, like it's like a chess player, isn't it?
Yeah,
he's like 2 or 3 steps ahead.
You can tell he's dealt with situations like this in the past and isn't actually that fazed by it.
Yeah, because he looks down on Sonny like an idiot. And when he gets himself into the bank, remember, they allow him to go in and have a wee look. He actually sort of plays with him psychologically quite a bit, remember? And then he's able to get inside the bank, see exactly what's going on. And guys with that level of knowledge and that level of experience, as soon as they've had a chance to see what's going on, the plan would very quickly formulate how to deal with this and how to deal with the people, because he also gets a sense of the person he's dealing with. Like, are they capable of this or not? And I think he earmarks quite quickly that Sal is definitely a threat. You know, he's a viable threat. It's that moment where he's leaving the bank, and he says to Pacino, like, we'll take out Sal, don't worry about it. You know, and he's kind of sowing those seeds, because I think he knows that he won't tell Sal what was said, because then Sal comes to him after and said, what did he say?
And he doesn't. He's always just talking about the limousine bus, and he doesn't say. But that's apparently the moment that got the real life bank robber into some bother in prison. That
they thought he sold him out.
He wants to kill me so bad he can taste it.
And Lance Henriksen pops up as one of the sort of cops as well at the side.
So fresh-faced and young.
He's not grown into his amazing face yet. But he's only got a relatively small part. He plays a huge part in the outcome. But for the majority of the movie, he's just kind of background. It's only really in the last 20 minutes that he sort of steps up. But this was his first film.
I'm still astounded by that, because he's so competent in the role. Yeah,
it's incredible. It actually is. But you can see how great an actor he is, and obviously what he's going to become as well. It's just amazing that he's never become like hugely mainstream. It might be just his way. Like, he might just pick certain projects and say...
I think he definitely reveres the art form. So he would probably pick a film based on its artistic merits rather than, this one pays lots of money.
Yeah, he seems like kind of guy. I mean, he's definitely getting paid a lot of good money as well.
He actually went for the part of Leon.
Yeah, that's right. And they just said it wouldn't work. You know.
And I think they're right. I think we'll talk about Chris Sarandon in a minute, but I think he was definitely the right person for that role.
Yeah, he was.
It's just a freak show to them anyway.
So Chris Sarandon plays Leon, who is Al Pacino's wife in this film.
Yep, he is.
And he's introduced...
His second wife.
He's introduced quite late on in the film, actually. And up until the point where he exits the car, you're not actually given any clues as to the gender of Leon.
Yep.
So it's only at the point when the police say your wife is here and Chris Sarandon gets out of the car that you realise that there's a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, and you can see all the murmuring starting and stuff like that, and that's when the people are starting to go, what's going on here?
But definitely not, this isn't a comedy moment. There's lots of comedy moments in this film, but this isn't one of them.
Yep.
The expression on his face is sort of bewilderment at what's going on and
he's distraught.
Fear. And it's absolutely not treated as a comedy moment at all. And this was Chris Sarandon's first film, so he was a stage actor, and what a fantastic performance.
I know. Like he, when he read for it, the only direction that Sidney Lumet gave him, like they knew straight away, a few minutes into his reading, they knew he was going to get it, but they said a bit less Blanche Dubois, a bit more New York housewife, Queen's housewife. And it's funny he said that because that's exactly what he comes across as, you know. But yeah, he's just amazing in it. I love him in Fright Night, as you know, and it's hard to choose which one's better. Yeah, he's showing amazing range, but yeah, like you said, he looks distraught, under pressure. He arrives when he's just tried to commit suicide. So he's still a bit drugged up, isn't he? To try and keep him sedated, and he's still kind of a bit out of it. He turns up and he's got his housecoat on, and you know he's always clutching at his housecoat, dressing gown to try and
keep himself covered.
Yeah, try and keep himself covered up, and you can see he clearly feels very vulnerable, and his hair's all sort of standing up on end and stuff like that. And I think Chris Sarandon really went full method on this. You know, like he grew his fingernails a bit longer. You know, he dressed up in certain ways, and he went out into the public and, you know, tried to sort of embody that kind of character. And the funny thing was, and he was saying, like, he was expecting a reaction.
He kind of wanted the reaction.
He was hoping for a reaction just so he could gauge, like, how's this working?
He act in that situation.
And he just said, like, New York, nothing phases New York. You know, people just, you go out there, you could look whatever way and people just walk past.
Yeah, there was not even a sideways glance. So I think he was a bit disappointed.
Yeah, I think he was. But clearly he knows his stuff, and he is just fantastic. Just like Pacino, he's got a monologue as well, like when they have their conversation. At first he sounds like he's listening, you know, and he's sympathetic, but then it's when Pacino sort of says, like, I'm dying here, and he just turns on him, you know, like, kind of like, you're dying, like, what the hell are you talking about, like, this is and that's when you start to realise that the relationship is heavily weighted in Sonny's favour, and it's all about what he wants, and you know, he's not really considering his feelings, it's all about him. Leon just feels like this is not going to go anywhere.
Like, I think Al Pacino's character Sonny thinks that he can fix him.
Yeah, that's like,
it. He'll get this money and that'll fix Leon. When obviously that's it's not.
Yeah, well, that's it. He wants to fix him, and he wants the relationship to work, and it's purely for selfish reasons. He doesn't want to lose him. He wants him. It's not about what Leon wants, and Leon's clearly the more intelligent, emotionally intelligent of the two. And he knows what he wants in a relationship, and this is not it. And you can hear that he's actually been terrible to him, you know, like Sonny's sort of beat him up and all that kind of stuff, and threatened him and all these kind of things. So yeah, they've clearly not had a great relationship, and it's not going to end well. And ultimately it kind of ends as good as it possibly could, really. You know, where it's not really like a shouting match at the end. It's like I said earlier, it's kind of an acceptance almost, but they just understand that this is not going any further.
It's like a melancholy. Chris Sarandon's last words to him over the phone are bon voyage. And it just really weighted with tragedy for both these characters.
And again, like we said earlier, Chris Sarandon never took any cheap shots in his mannerisms, how he dressed, how he spoke, how he delivered his lines. You know, he treated it again with the utmost respect. And again, we said it before, but every single one of these performances feels really authentic. Like these are real people, and you're watching their lives unfold before you. Just the emotion, the drama, the comedy, the tension, you know. Him and Pacino and John Cazale, or that little triumvirate, are just amazing.
Why didn't he tell me he needed money?
So the majority of the female cast in this are really the bank tellers and people who work in the bank. And you've also got Sonny's first wife and his mother, and she's played by Judith Malina. And they only really have like maybe one scene together, and she has another scene where she's speaking to his wife, but she's brilliant in this. And again, that sort of puts forward that idea of the relationships in this that are so broken. There's so many broken relationships in this film.
No one listens to anyone.
No one listens.
Like, there's so many points where people talk over each other, and I realised I spoke over you when I said that. But there's so many points where people talk over each other, and you know, if they are listening, they're listening to respond. They're not listening to take in what the other's saying. Yep,
they just want to get their point across. Say their part.
And you can really see how these dysfunctional relationships have fed into where these characters are at now, and how they feel about certain situations. And
she does a great turn as, you know, this kind of end of the tether mother, uber Christian type of deal, you know, like, you know, everything's going to be okay, we just have to kind of like believe and go forward.
You know, very backward opinion that if your first wife wasn't treating you badly, you wouldn't have had to go to Leon.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Yeah,
taking women's rights back a couple of hundred years.
Like, so, but you know, those characters exist as people.
Well, exactly.
You know, so it's not.
And I think it was the perfect background for Sonny to come from, for you to believe in his character. You know, clearly he came from a a harsh upbringing in some way, and maybe he wasn't beaten up or whatever in this case, but he clearly was never listened to and never taken seriously, and that's affected him as an adult.
Yeah, and probably the lack of understanding about sexuality and gender identity issues fed into lack of communication and poor relationships.
Yeah. But I love how embarrassed Pacino is by her.
I know.
When she comes, it's like, ma. And again, that's another one of those ones that feels a wee bit comical. It verges on that and it's a bit funny. But then when the conversation begins, you can see why he's embarrassed.
Yeah.
He just really doesn't want her to be there.
It's not the fact that she's his mother, it's the fact that he knows what she's like.
He knows what she's like. He knows she's not going to listen. So this is a pointless exercise and it's just a waste of energy.
It's all a whim. Rob a bank.
I had a plan. I had it planned.
One of the other lead female characters is Penny Allen, and she's kind of like the head bank teller, and she's got such a brilliant attitude. I think at first everybody's taken aback, shocked by the fact that they're being robbed, but she stands up for people very, very quickly. Yeah. And she's very succinct in what she wants. And she calls them out on a number of occasions as well. There's a couple of great reactions in this.
You robbed a bank on a whim.
You robbed a bank on a whim. Yeah. So she's absolutely fabulous in this. And she's got a brilliant moment at the very end of the film where the plot plays out with Sal, and Sal gets shot in the head by Murphy. And during that take, they were supposed to just run and leave the car, you know, as you would do, like, oh, you're free, the hostage situation is over.
There's guns being fired.
Everybody just leave. And she refused to budge at that point. And they had to cut, and Sidney Lumet asked her, you know, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to leave. And she's like, I would never leave him at this point. Yeah. Like, Sonny needs somebody, like, he's just lost his partner and he's in a terrible situation, and I would never leave him. And that was simply because she was thinking along the lines again of how would this character react in that situation. And she was like a big mother hen, you know, standing up for everybody and like, when are we going to the toilet, and you need to organise this, you need to organise food,
to get food.
All that kind of stuff. So she looked after people in that kind of really strong
and
way.
You could say, like, they built up a rapport, you know. It was the hostages by the end of the situation weren't frightened of their captors.
No. There's moments where you see it allows one of the girls to like play with his gun. Yeah,
that sounds really weird, but
but he's showing her how to do like a kind of military moves, you know, like
how
with
to
the spinning the guns,
arms.
But that added to the realism overall. And again, this is what we talked about a bit earlier, that Sidney Lumet is famous for his realism. Again, we talked about how this was actually a real life situation. So these little character moments, these choices, showed how seriously these actors were taking it. And Lumet talked about how realism is just naturalism distilled. I thought it was a great quote. And that's exactly the effect he was going for there.
Hello, Sonny. You're on the air.
He also talked about how important it was to shoot on location, and that New York played a character in the film. I think you've seen that in so many films. We talked about it in Ghostbusters as well, about how New York is just one of those iconic cities where it is a character in a film, because the locations, the places, you know, the people, the vibe, everything about it sort of adds something to the film itself. Yeah. And this is very clearly a New York based event. You know, it was very important that they didn't just shoot this on a stage like somewhere in LA or whatever.
Yeah, and they spend some time at the start of the film setting the scene with various little shots throughout Brooklyn that were just filmed kind of off the cuff, driving around. And actually you do see Sonny's wife and kids.
That's right.
In that scene, although you don't realise until later, but you know, you see the divide, you see people doing very, let's say, rich pursuits, and then you see like dogs eating out of rubbish and people
and you can see that New York was going through that crisis with the garbage, you know, that the streets are very, very messy, and I think this was when the mob was in control of the sort of, you know,
of the waste
garbage
disposal,
removal, waste disposal. So all the points in between, as you said, from rich to poor, high to low, and it can look disgusting at times, it looks oppressive at times, and other times it looks like the greatest place in the world to live. The people in the swimming pool and people playing tennis and stuff like that, you know. So, but yeah, it was built in an old auto repair shop, and they just built the bank inside it, but it was on a real street, and they had to redirect buses and stuff to make sure that it was quiet on set and everything, and there wasn't any disruptions. But
what was fantastic about that, and we spoke earlier about it feeling almost like a theatrical set, it meant that there was continuity for the actors. There was true continuity. You know, when Al Pacino ran off of the street into the bank, he ran off of the street and into the bank.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it wasn't that you did all this bit on location and you did this on a soundstage separately. It was all there.
And as you said earlier, I think Sidney Lumet just got in a station wagon and just poked a camera out and caught real people doing real things. That is a fabulous way to open the film, because then you get that moment where, as you said, you see his wife, Angie, and the kids. You don't know who she is. And then you see her again. And And then the next kind of thing you get is Pacino sitting in the car. And you go, oh, it's Al Pacino.
Yeah, and it's not really clear until you realise it's Al Pacino that, you know, the film has started now. You know, it's just, it looks like another cut of something else happening on just another dog day afternoon.
Yeah, it's like documentary footage.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it lands on this actor. You're like, oh, we're in.
Sonny, Jesus, I was watching it on TV.
One of the cool things about the set they built was that it had what was called wild walls inside it. And it's essentially a wall that is easily removed so that you can then put cameras in or get shots from different places, and without having to like change the setup or rebuild the set around it. So I thought it was a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And they to cover up the pit where you would normally have the cars being worked on, that auto repair pit.
Yeah. The other advantage it gave them was that they were able to model the lighting exactly how they wanted it.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was no actual like traditional film lighting used in this. It was all fluorescent lighting as you would get in the bank. But you know, they were then able to like bring in more fluorescent lights where they needed.
Yeah, everything was done fluorescent lighting, like you said. So even the fill lights, for example, to get more light on the characters, normally that would have been like, you know, proper lighting. But they just used fluorescent lights again. So that had that kind of continuity of look. And as you said, they were able to place the emergency lighting, because remember when there's a point where the FBI turned the lights off, and then they needed lights to be pointing in certain places because the actors were going to be there, so they were able to just put them where they wanted them, and you don't even notice it in the film. You know, you don't even notice they're there until the lights go off and everyone's still lit. So that was really, really clever. And on the outside, they actually had the street lighting. They boosted that a little bit, where it was still regular street lighting. They just boosted it, I think, and that provided backlight to the crowd that was standing. You know what I mean?
Also deliberately coloured the front of they chose a building that had a light, pale exterior, so that the light would be reflected back into the crowd more as well. So, you know, really intelligent choices made by the director.
It just, Sidney Lumet wanted to avoid the decorated look. So he wanted to always make it look real.
Yeah.
Like this was just a real street with real lighting, and there wasn't anything false added to it, and keep it honest.
Yep.
And that's exactly it. So in that situation, you have to be creative. The great thing from the production point of view is that it's super cheap. You know, like the budget for this film was only like $400,000.
That's
like
insane.
Under $500,000, right, for this masterpiece, right? They were able to do that, and then it took $50 million or something, you know, in receipts at the box office. That's like an incredible return.
It is. And the other thing I think that feeds into that, apart from the fact that, you know, it's low tech from a lighting and staging point of view, the fact that so much of it was rehearsed in advance meant that the product, what they were creating during filming, was very, very lean. Apparently there was not a lot of footage that wasn't used, so you know, they really did the preparation in order to save time and effort, and it was a really slick operation. Yeah,
as you said earlier, I think it was 3 weeks of rehearsal, and just everyone knew their place. It was meticulous. But like we said, also there was improvisation, but that was largely in respect to how the script went. There wasn't really that much improvisation as far as like moving around was concerned. You know, like things were certainly set so that the camera angle would be correct and the placement would be correct and stuff. So it was also shot in the middle of, well, it wasn't exactly the middle of winter, but it was quite cold. It was late autumn, wasn't it?
I think so.
And it was supposed to be, again, dog day afternoon, the middle of summer, like this really heavy, oppressive, hot day. And they actually had to use that old trick of having ice in the mouth so that you wouldn't see their breath when they came out onto the street, because it's too cold, you come out, you see the breath, so you put ice in your mouth, lowers the temperature, and then you can't see it. What was the other film that we seen that trick in again?
I think it was a vampire film that we watched. Was it Near Dark, maybe? Because they were vampires, and right, so they wouldn't have warm breath.
Yes, and that was another one of our archives.
Check that out if you haven't already.
But yeah, that's a really cool technique, and these are all like these wee cool classical effect techniques. Kind of get lost a little bit, because now digitally you would just like, it's fine, we'll just remove your breath digitally.
But when you're on a $500,000 budget, you just stick some ice in your mouth.
Stick some ice in your
get on with it.
Yeah.
We're entertainment, right? What do you got for us?
As you said earlier, it was quite a tight shoot, and there wasn't really that much to trim. There was no sort of excess footage, but there was 6 or 7 minutes that they had removed for the original edit that they gave to the studio. And I think the problem was that there's the monologue where he is dictating the will, and he just felt like the film started to move too quickly, and then that scene's quite long and drawn out, as it had to be. There's a lot of tension in that scene because it was actually the real will he was reading out pretty much word for word. So he wanted to give that the right gravitas. So it needed to be a slow scene. So he added in another 6 and 7 minutes that they'd taken out just to like slow the rhythm down, so that when it got to that point it didn't feel out of place, and then things can kind of pick up a little bit from there on as it sort of builds to the climax. So
I think pacing can quite often be overlooked in films, especially in big budget blockbusters that are looking to sell toys and
yeah, it's usually the reverse in those films where everything's just too quick. It's snap, 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 next, you know. So it doesn't take time to sort of ruminate on things and ideas, you know. But the reverse is also true, where some things just can take too long to build. You know, they spend too much time in a scene, and maybe the scene doesn't have as much importance, you know, and you overplay it, so you maybe need to cut that to improve the pacing. But I think it's interesting that normally, in order to improve the pacing, is usually cutting things rather than putting stuff back. So I thought that was quite an interesting idea, that he actually had to put footage back in order to slow it down a bit.
You're starting to get on my nerves.
So we always talk about important themes and messages that stand out in each film, and I think in this one we've already touched on these a little bit, but I think the idea of listening to people in a relationship, you know, where it's a one-way street as far as any particular relationship is concerned. So there's multiple cases in this film of people just simply not listening to each other, and it all being about them. So initially you've got Leon and Sonny, right? So Sonny is robbing the bank to get the money for the sex change. He thinks this is going to fix everything. It's going to be fine. The relationship is going to get stronger from this point forward. But he's clearly never listened to what Leon's got to say.
Leon wants out of the relationship.
He wants out, doesn't want to be there. He's never considered his feelings, and clearly he just doesn't care. Maybe it's not like something that he consciously brings forward, like, I don't care. But
yeah, like he cares deeply for Leon.
Exactly.
But yeah, he's not got that kind of emotional maturity to understand that what's best for you is not always what's best for everyone else.
Exactly. So then you move on to Sonny's relationship with his mother. Again, we touched a little bit on it. They have that conversation where she is just bulldozing her way through it. It's going to be fine. You should have done this. You should have done that. Just listen to me. I've got your best interest at heart. I know. I've got experience. And she is just not listening to him. You know, he's on the other side of that argument now, where, you know, he's just being dismissed. And you can see it again when he speaks to his wife Angie on the phone. She's just like laying down all the things, the problems, and they are valid problems. You know, even though she's the one doing all the speaking, he's clearly not listening to her or her needs and what she wants and needs from their relationship. So there's just so many times in this film where people are just, there's crosstalk, there's an aspect of someone thinking they know best in a situation and basically making the other person's decision for them.
And and thinking that they know what the other person wants. Same as the relationship between Sal and Sonny as well, like just not establishing properly.
Yeah, there's a lot of crosstalk in their relationship as well.
And the other big theme in there, I think, is you can't please all the people all the time.
No, you certainly can't. And that's something Sonny could definitely learn.
I know.
He does try so hard, you know, but again, it's about his motivations. And I think his motivations are selfish and manipulative on occasion, but he desperately tries. Sometimes, you know, there's points where you genuinely feel for him, like, and you feel like he cares. Yeah. With the people going to the toilet and getting food and all these kind of things. Like, I think again, it's all for the outcome. Like he knows, right, okay, this is going to get me to where I need to be. In that situation, he should probably just say, I don't care what you think. I'm focused on this thing. And that again speaks to how his mind is so completely unfocused and not ready for this thing that he's trying to do. He's not ready. He's not thought about it all. Do you
think he wants everyone to like him as well?
That's possible. He definitely comes across as someone who doesn't want to cause harm. He just wants to get this situation over and done with. It's not personal, and he never really comes across as aggressive or angry, apart from to those he loves. You know, like, funnily enough, the people that he could be taking issue with and getting angry with, which might have worked better for him in a bank robbery, should have been those people who are like picking him up on silly things and, you know, asking him for silly things and mundane things. Not to say it would have been a good thing, but, you know, turning his anger on those people might have worked better in this situation.
If he wanted a successful bank robbery,
exactly.
His focus was in the wrong place.
His focus was in the wrong place. I think it comes back to that idea that it's easier to be nasty to somebody you love than somebody you don't know. The kind of familiarity breeds contempt idea. And that's certainly something that he does in this film. You know, like he's really obnoxious and sort of short.
And he
with
really
the people
loses it with his wife, his first wife, and his mum.
Exactly.
But you can tell it's built up.
Yeah, it's built up. But they're easy targets in his mind, I think.
I'm here with my partner and 9 other people. See, we're dying.
For me, my most memorable moment in the film is when Sonny is dictating his last will and testament.
Yeah.
And it's been copied down by I think one of the bank tellers.
Yeah, it's Penny Allen, isn't it?
There's a moment in it, I'm not going to say the exact words he uses. If you've not seen it, you really must watch it, and you must watch the way that this is delivered. It's delivered with such heartfelt intensity.
Care and attention.
It's really beautiful. And I actually dug out an article that was written by the real bank robber after the film came out. So I think he sent this into the New York Times in I think about 1977. He's got some negative things to say about some aspects of the film, but he's highly complimentary about the directing and the acting, particularly Al Pacino and Chris Sarandon. But what stood out to me was he actually addresses specifically this moment where Al Pacino is reenacting the reading of his will, and he says, "I was very touched and cried in the most moving scene in the entire movie, the one in which he dictates my last will and testament." Now, bearing in mind he's writing this letter from prison, during this memorable scene, over 1,300 men in here were completely silent, and you could hear a pin drop. For an hour and a half previously, everyone was laughing, but then it all stopped, and the truth and stark realism was finally presented in one of the most moving scenes I've ever seen in a motion picture.
And Shonagh almost broke there.
I did. Honestly, I was trying so hard. Like, the fact that even the person who these events were based on considered this such a fantastic portrayal.
Yeah, it's pretty much the highest praise you can get if you're an actor.
Definitely.
But the real life person said that you captured every essence of what I was thinking at that time.
Yeah, and he actually goes on to talk about Chris Sarandon, and he says, "Chris Sarandon, who plays my male lover in the movie, also deserves the Academy Award for Best Male Supporting Actor. It was his film debut, and he was too much for words. He had to portray the widest range of emotions, but do it in the right way. I felt that he did it perfectly."
Well, I mean, it is one of his best performances of his career. And again, because it was his first one, it's so memorable for him and for everybody who follows his career. So your favourite moment is the scene with the will? The dictating of the will?
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's lots of moments in this film that are really, really very funny. But I think I was really blown away by the calibre of the performance in that scene.
So most memorable moment for me is a silly one, really. In comparison to that, I mean, I love the sequence you've just talked about, the reading of the will, and also the monologue on the phone between Al Pacino and Chris Sarandon. Those sequences are probably the best acting in the movie and pretty much of all time. They're really fantastic sequences. But for me, it is the moment where he tries to get the gun out of the box. I think it's so hilarious.
I feel like it's the film in microcosm.
It really is. That is it. That's exactly it. It encapsulates the film. It's this moment of, holy fuck, how could it go that wrong?
Yeah.
How could it go this badly? It's
so early on.
It's only just started and he can't even get the first move.
He's literally fallen at the first hurdle.
It's like if you were sitting in front of a piano and you're just about to play like something on the piano, like a concerto or whatever, and you'd sit down and you ready it and you play the first note and it's a bum note or it's out of tune or something like that. That's what it's like.
Exactly.
It's just this first moment of wah, 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 straight away. And it just, like you said, I think it just encapsulates the movie in that one wee perfect moment.
Definitely.
And it's brilliantly acted. It's just fantastic.
In the letter that John wrote to the New York Times, just to address what you were saying about the telephone scene, so he says, if in real life Ernie, and Ernie was the birth name of the character Leon, later on her name was changed to Elizabeth, but Ernie was the name when John met his wife. So what he says was, if in real life Ernie had said those things and done those actions, he would have done them exactly as Chris did them. In the telephone scene between Pacino and himself, his performance was unfathomable and a tribute to his mastery of an unbelievably difficult role. I was moved to tears by it because the realism was there and so professionally done. I mean, I don't think you can get any higher praise than that.
You're going to see our brains on the sidewalk. They're going to spill our guts out.
So what's your favourite quote? I think we're maybe the same on this one, aren't we?
Yeah, it's got to be, any special country you'd like to go to? Wyoming.
Wyoming.
It's
one word, but that is my favourite quote of this film.
It's witty and tragic.
And again, a moment that encapsulates the film.
Yeah. I feel
tragic,
I feel quite
comedic,
emotional thinking about it.
Just out of left field. And again, that the film is that way.
Yeah.
You know, because the subject matter and the characters and everything was just a wee bit out of left field as far as kind of films that were in Hollywood at the time. And as we touched on earlier, it's just Cazalli's delivery. Delivered perfectly, one note, and it's like a mic drop.
Yeah.
Just absolutely fantastic.
1,
We get a helicopter here.
2,
Takes us to a jet.
3. I'm flying to the tropics.
So best performance? There's not a weak performance.
There's not a weak performance.
There's definitely not. You would never get one, I don't think, with this cast and that director. There's no way you were going to get a weak performance. He wouldn't allow it,
No.
quite simply.
But there is a standout.
There is a
favourite.
standout. And as we said, Pacino didn't get the Oscar for Best Actor, but he would have done in any other year.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
without a doubt. And that even comes for now. Do you know what I mean? I think put Dog Day Afternoon and that performance in the Oscars these days, and it would just blow away the competition.
Insane.
You know?
Insane.
So yeah, Al Pacino, absolutely 100% all day. This is one of his best performances for me.
I think so.
Comes right after The Godfather and Serpico, and again they're heavyweights. They're like proper cinematic heavyweights. He's going to go on to do stuff like Scarface. Maybe he's most remembered for Scarface and The Godfather, but from an acting perspective, I think this is just some of his best work, if not the best. Overall, you've got great performance in The Godfather all the way through, but there's moments in this film where he just transcends.
We did it.
If you haven't seen Dog Day Afternoon, I heartily encourage you to get out there and see it immediately. Or don't get out there because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So stay at home and watch it immediately. There's also a documentary style film called The Dog, which was made after the film, that kind of gives a little bit more insight into the original players, if you will.
I think that was actually his nickname in prison, wasn't it? The Dog. And when people did an interview with him later in life, he asked them what the password was and they didn't know, and it was The Dog. And it was just, he sounds like a bit of a crazy person now.
He sounds like a crazy character,
Absolutely. But yeah, as Shonagh said, I think if you've not seen this film, absolutely check it out. You won't regret it.
Absolutely wasn't what I expected. And I feel guilty that for all these years I've been like, no, I don't want to watch that. And actually it's fantastic.
It's an amazing character piece, fantastically acted, brilliantly directed, and way ahead of its time in terms of representation and the progressive nature of the characters. This is why, again, and like I said earlier, I think this film deserves a bit more recognition. People just need to see this. So thanks once again for listening. Again, to all of you who have downloaded and shown support to the podcast, thank you very much. Your support is hugely appreciated.
You can support us by subscribing to our channel or by leaving us a little review on Apple Podcasts. That would be awesome.
Don't forget you can find us on YouTube as well. Just search for Deckard's Unicorn. We've got a channel over there, and you can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. Again, just search for Deckard's Unicorn.
So thanks again for listening. We'll be back next time with some more film chat. Until then, if you fancy robbing a bank, maybe don't.